Well, hey everyone, I'm Dan Zimbardi. I'm the executive pastor at Sandals Church, and I want to welcome you to our executive industry panel. You know, the world is changing faster than ever before, and we're living in an incredibly complex time. And so today's leader and tomorrow's leader must see and deliver change. And the reason why they must see and deliver change is because organizations that aren't changing and evolving with culture, with the economy, and with technology, they're simply not going to make it in these years ahead. So I have invited some of my friends, some incredible leaders, experts in their industries, to share their perspectives, their heart and their vision on how to lead through change. And so my hope for you is that you will glean some best practices or some principles as you are looking to lead your organization. Could be a church, could be a nonprofit, it could be a small business, to lead your organization through change. And so I'm so excited for you to be here. My hope and my prayer for you is that you will pick up at least one nugget that you can take away so that will help you to better lead your organization into this next season. All right, let me introduce our panel. First, to my right, Dr. Charles D. Sands. Around here at Sandals, we call him Chuck. Chuck currently serves as the Provost and Vice President for Academic Affairs. He's the Chief Academic Officer at Cal Baptist University. Prior to assuming this role, he served as the Founding Dean for the College of Health Science at CBU. In addition, Chuck is the Chief Operations Consultant and Chief Public Health Consultant for Chai-Tai International Hospital in Jilin City, China. Chuck, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Next, we have Alexis Andra. Alexis is the owner of The Shift Creative, a full-service creative agency in Southern California. They work with brands and conferences to elevate their events through experiential installations, stage design, and branded photo moments. Some of their clients include Nike Women, Pop Sugar, Revolve, Create and Cultivate, Michaels, and I'll add to the list, Sandals Church. Thank you for being here, Alexis.
Thank you.
And then next we have Frank Terrell. Frank is a Silicon Valley technology executive with 30 plus years experience in venture-backed startup and tenured businesses. Frank is the COO of Adara and is a frequent speaker and thought leader on digital identities, cybersecurity, and internet fraud prevention topics. Thanks, Frank, for being here.
Glad to be here.
And then next to Frank is Jonathan Palacios Avia, and he is the Chief Executive Officer of Stratus Fuel. Stratus Fuel, Inc. is a renewable hydrogen production company that owns and operates refueling stations, production plants, and the fuel cell car sharing company, Stratus Share. Jonathan, thank you for being here. All right. And then finally on our panel, my good friend Tony Amaradio. Tony is the founder and chief strategist for Select Portfolio Management, Inc. He is a visionary and innovator in the financial services industry for more than 20 years. Tony was the host of his daily radio show, Market Talk. For the last several years, Tony has followed his passion for devoting a third of his time to philanthropy and nonprofit organizations. Tony, thank you so much for being here. Panelists, to all of you, we are so grateful that you would come and share your wisdom and experience with those that are watching. It is such a crucial time for businesses, churches, and nonprofits. Sadly, because of what COVID has done, many organizations are hanging on by a thread. And so change is more important than ever before. And so we are grateful that you would share your wisdom with us today. All right, let's get started. Chuck, I want to talk about leading yourself. And so you lead a large organization, hundreds, thousands of staff and employees at Cal Baptist. And when you heard the word quarantine and you were thinking, okay, we're really locking everything down, how did you prepare yourself? How did you get ready yourself? Because you had to lead a lot of other people. You're also leading and serving students. And in today's age, part of your customer base is your students' parents, right? And
Absolutely.
so, which I'm sure creates some level of challenges. So talk to leaders out there and talk about how did you prepare yourself to lead others?
Yeah, so such a great question and such an important question for us to think about. I think the first thing that came to my mind, Dan, was one phrase with a couple of words, and the key was be calm and we'll be better. Be calm and we'll be better. And so I had to do that for myself first. So what does quarantine mean at an institution with 11,000 students, and as you said, thousands of employees? If I'm not calm, many other people will not be calm as well. So it was such an important component. And as a leader, I think sometimes we need to remind ourselves our behavior and our actions and our words are so powerful at influencing others many times when we're not thinking that we're influencing. And so being calm was such an important thing for me. And then as a result of that, I feel like we actually have gotten better at CBU. We're better. Now, be calm isn't the only thing we did, but in the context of the question you're asking, I think it was so important for me. The other thing I would add related to being calm is I had to take care of myself. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, I had to make sure that I was in a good routine because quarantine caused us to change our routine. So what about my physical, emotional, and spiritual health that I need to emphasize and make sure I was focusing on that I could also relate back to being calm?
That's great. That's great. Thank you. When I think about leading others through crisis, it starts with me. I have to lead myself first. And so thank you for sharing that. Tony, I'm going to throw to you. I can imagine when March hit, quarantine hit, many of your customers, I'm assuming, panic hit for them. You know, they're thinking about their investments, they're thinking about their life savings. And so how did you first get yourself ready to lead not just your staff, but your clients through this really difficult season? And then any adjustments or changes that you made immediately would be helpful for our audience.
Dan, that's a great question. And this is not the first major correction I've been through. I've been around for a long time. And so the first thing that I always do is I go back to my relationship with Christ as a Christian businessman. And I pray and actually ask for the Lord's leadership. And as was mentioned earlier, you don't panic, you stay calm. The next step is to develop a plan. And we are prepared to do that because we're in the investment banking industry. We have to be prepared for some kind of event like a pandemic or a geopolitical event. Could be an earthquake, or it could be something major. So we're well prepared for a situation like that because we are essential. We have to stay open. And then the next step was to really gather my team and really give them the directions that I want to implement the plan. And then finally, it had to be a great communication process to our clients. Like you said, the worst thing to do is to panic. And when you have a correction in the stock market, it's almost always never a good idea to panic and make a big change. However, we did look at the situation and say, okay, what type of companies and stocks would do well in a pandemic environment? So we made some significant trades and changes to adjust the portfolios of our clients so that they wouldn't take the full brunt of a correction. And so, but ultimately, what you gotta get back to as a Christian businessman is either God's in it or God's out of it. And so if God's in it, guess who's in charge? Not you. And I think most of us business owners are type A's. In many ways, we want to take charge and control. And so really, what I'd rather do is say the CEO of my company is Jesus Christ. And I rely on him for wisdom. Actually, I pray every day for our clients' assets and our clients themselves. So I find that spiritual, which you mentioned, the calmness came to me. So I didn't panic, didn't have fear, because they'll see that, in you, not only for your team, but also for your clients. When you call them on the phone and talk to them, they want to know you're confident and that they can trust you and that you're in control of things.
Yeah, that's great. All right, Frank, to you. So many leaders are struggling right now, present day, to lead their organization forward. I mean, they're struggling personally. This crisis has affected everyone in significant ways. When you think about preparing for leading others through a difficult season, What do you think about? How did you prepare yourself, and what advice would you give to other leaders as they think about preparing themselves to lead people through this crisis?
Yeah, it's interesting. Tony mentioned earlier about the concept of earthquakes and other events. You know, COVID was a forcing function for us to prove our business continuity plan and disaster recovery plans. And if you're a leader, you should be building those in advance of a crisis, right? And it deals with, you know, what happens if there's an earthquake? What happens if you have to go virtual? What happens when you lose your customers? I think 3 things for us that were critical focuses at Adara. Number 1, you got to focus on the things that matter. And as leaders, we preside over 3 constituencies: our customers, our employees, and our investors, right? And so the issue became, how do we create an opportunity to really speak to each of them and put together a plan that makes sense? On the customer front, retention, retention, retention. It's going to take longer for them to pay you. So DSOs are going to slide a little bit, right? Your liquidity is going to be affected a little bit because it takes a little longer to pay. On the investor side, you know, we've raised a lot of money, right? And we want the investors to know that, hey, this is money well spent, and we have a plan to exit COVID. It may not be a V shape, it'll be a U shape maybe. And here's our plan, and that plan's predicated on great customer, you know, retention. And then finally, employees. And, you know, like many companies, many of us had to furlough a lot of people. And that creates an interesting challenge because you have personal relationships, employees that knew other people that were working with them that now aren't. And so motivating those individuals to say, look, see us through this, right? Through equity grants and compensation and other models to make them realize it's going to be a little bit tough, but coming out the back end, it's worth it. Were critical for us. So we tested our business continuity plan. We tested our disaster recovery plan. Those functioned well. We were able to, you know, data centers still worked, you know, Zoom still worked. We were able to do the things we need to do, but it was really important to focus on those 3 keys. And as leaders, guys, you know, focus is the most important thing in a change event. If you become diffracted, you know, it'll be a disaster. So what are the things that matter? Focus on those things. Communicate effectively. Communicate openly, right? You know, one example I'll leave you with, but, you know, I remember my AR guy, my accounts receivable person coming to me saying, nobody's answering the phone. Well, because they were furloughed, right? So you have a real challenge, or even mundane, perfunctory things like collecting cash for the folks in Treasury became a real challenge. So, you know, how do we reach out in retention programs? You know, things like economic incentives, price drops, longer terms on contracts, you know, things to allow customers to say, look, when we come out of the back end of this thing, I still want to use you as a customer. That was important. So, you know, as a leader, any change event is a forcing function to allow you to look at the organization and improve it. And, you know, it's painful. You know, we're now months into this thing, and, you know, hopefully we're looking at it going in Q1, things are back to normal. But having gone through this, I think that imperative of just stay focused. You said earlier, Chuck, stay calm. You know, the last thing leaders can portray is panic. So you have a plan, stick to the plan. You know, stay focused on that plan and bring people along. And to me, the real you know, issue for leadership and the blessing for all of us if we get the right teams around us, empower your teams. Don't single thread. You know, empower them based on their skill sets to solve those problems. And I think that's an important part of, you know, our mindset getting through COVID.
That's great. All right, let's jump to the second question. Alexis, Jonathan, and Chuck, I want to talk about agility. One of my favorite words, and this is an incredibly important tool in the leader's toolbox, especially right now. We think about agility as seeing and then delivering change. That's the agile leader. They can see changes that need to happen. And so what key change did you see that needed to happen in your business or organization, especially when COVID hit, or what change needs to happen now as you look to a post-COVID world? Tell us about changes that you made to your organization or are making as we head into this post-COVID world.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that, you know, leaders need to have a vision in order to sustain their team and their organization. And when COVID first hit, I had to think really quick, because I'm in the events industry. No one's having events in COVID. Yeah. So there was 3 main things that I had to pivot right at the, on the onset, which was, number 1, we started thinking, what are we really good at? And what do we already currently have in our toolbox? And the 2 things were really great design and a loyal social media following. So one of the first things we did for our employees to create job security was to create a line of merchandise. Now, this was quick thinking. Within, I want to say, 4 days when we were in quarantine, we designed merchandise, we got it produced, and we started selling it.
Wow.
Okay, and really all the profits went to our employees to show them we care, we're in this together. And then number 2, we started offering coaching courses. So I looked at not only the design part of the business, but the business side. And I saw a lot of demand for especially young entrepreneurs for us to pull back the curtain and reveal how did we get where we are today. So I started investing each week in young entrepreneurs and offered coaching courses. And then thirdly, we offer creative courses. So now people can purchase online and they can learn how to build their own backdrop. And so that not only serves our community in teaching a skill set, but it also serves us to create passive income.
Yeah,
So those are the 3 main things.
I love that. And I think that especially for small business owners who are perhaps struggling the most through this whole quarantine, the rate or the pace in which you pivoted was really astounding. And I think that's really making the difference for some surviving and some not surviving as we look to come out of COVID and the quarantine. And so the pace in which you pivoted, I think, is incredible. And I think it's a great lesson for our other leaders. Yeah. All right, Jonathan, can you talk to us about agility? Seeing and delivering change. What change did you see that needed to happen at your company? Or what change do you see that needs to happen in your company and or industry as you look to these months and years ahead?
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the major things that we saw during the COVID is we had to really evaluate and assess the situation. Our business is transportation, so we're considered an essential business company. But during this time, transportation has been at an all-time low. And as part of our business strategy is car sharing. And we weren't seeing a lot of interest in people doing shared mobility or car sharing because, one, they're working from home or they're just fearful to go out because of catching COVID. So what we started to look at was, well, what if we market shared mobility to essential workers? Our vehicles were already located and deployed at transit centers, airports, and universities. So we started to really market our vehicles to pilots that were transporting cargo for UPS or FedEx. And we saw that as a major niche market for shared mobility. And now we're using that to expand. Additionally, we also brought someone on board that went out and really did business development and found key areas where people were still traveling for essential business. And we started to deploy our cars at hotels where people who are essential need a vehicle. It's on demand. And we saw that as a key entity, our asset to our business, and now that's part of our new strategy as we continue to roll out cars.
I love it. I love it. When I talked to Jonathan's uncle at church a few years ago, told this story before, and he was telling me about you. I hadn't met you yet, and he was describing your company, and he said you can put a cup up against the muffler of one of these hydrogen fuel cars, and whatever comes out of the tailpipe, you could actually drink it.
That's correct.
And so I said, I need to meet this young Jonathan.
Absolutely,
So we're so glad you're here. That was great.
Thank you.
Chuck, I can't imagine running an institution, higher education students, well over 10,000 students, thousands of employees. We've been doing college as we know it the same way for, 100 plus years, long time, a couple hundred years. And so now students and teachers can't meet in the same place. So talk us through what changes you've made, what changes you're thinking about making. Maybe we've got some leaders in a role similar to yours who are leading, whether it's a lower level school or higher education. Give them some counsel and thoughts based on your experience.
Yeah, so I think, again, if I go back to where I started with being calm, what I would do is talk to people about creating conditions for success. We've been using that language for a while, so we had to pause and say, okay, well, what are the conditions that we want to use to be successful? So you're absolutely right. Part of what we do is we connect with people face to face in real time. And that was completely changed. And so what we had to do is realize, okay, how do we capture that relationship? How do we enhance the ability to communicate, because we all know education is more than just information transfer. If that's all it is, you can read on your own and you don't have to go to school.
Yeah.
So what we wanted to do was create an environment as close to face-to-face as possible. But the challenge there is you have students who are used to looking at a screen passively.
Yeah.
So they look at a phone, they watch movies, they watch video all the time. They don't interact. They just absorb and they're passively receiving. So the faculty member, like many people who speak publicly, you're feeding off of that, quote, crowd. So not only do we have to teach the students to interact, we have to teach the faculty member to engage in a different way. So we're still working through that. We have not figured it out. We've gotten a lot better. We had the summer to kind of recover. We have a small number of classes in the summer, but nothing compared to spring or fall. Right now we're teaching 3,000 classes at a time.
Wow.
So what that means is we had to invest in technology in a way that we had never invested before. Now we were ahead of other schools and universities because we had some of that. But what we really had to invest in, Dan, was training so that our faculty could be better. So they could be better at engaging with the students and connecting with them. So we're still learning that. We're learning how to do live teaching through the web, and students have to show up at their designated time. That's very different from your traditional online model. The online model typically is the course is sitting out there, it waits for you to engage. What we want, though, is at Monday at 9 o'clock, if you're supposed to be in class, you need to show up and it's live. So what is that experience? What are they learning? How are they engaging? That's really what we're wrestling with right now.
Great. Well, it sounds like you have a simple problem to solve.
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, well, that's great. Let's move to this next question. Jonathan and Tony, I'm going to throw to you. Let's talk about cultural shifts. There's a lot of things happening in our culture right now that are impacting just about every organization today. Here's a great example. Most large corporations have included social awareness in their branding based on all the shifts that are happening with our culture. Social consciousness is at an all-time high, and people are starting businesses and nonprofits with a major social component. You think about Tom's Shoes, you think about Charity Water, some good examples. What cultural shifts are happening now that may influence your company's strategy in the coming months and years? What shifts are happening in culture that's impacting how you're thinking and how you're leading your company? Jonathan, you want to get us started?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think that's a really great question, because kind of how we started off, we had to really rethink how we clean the vehicles, because that's kind of our main focus. So we started off by taking vehicles offline. So they're maybe we double clean them. We wipe them down after the rentals. Before, it was just a typical, run to the wash, vacuum type thing. So we really had to change that. And in terms of our office, we really weren't open to public. We are now doing most of the things online. Our business has become COVID compliant within our county. So we have hand sanitizers throughout the office. We check temperatures, require masks, and things like that. But I think this is kind of setting the stage for how we're going to go about and continue to operate our business as we really establish newer cleaning protocols, and maybe having people, check the vehicles, so writing down the timestamp on when the vehicles were clean and things like that. So it's still a learning curve, but we're getting there.
That's great. That's great. Thank you, Jonathan. All right, Tony, what about you guys? You guys have been doing what you've been doing for a while, right? Fair to say. Today's investor, who's maybe in their 20s, maybe even in their 30s, thinks differently, maybe has different values. That happens with every generation, right? So what shifts are you thinking about with your business?
Well, the first shift was, as Jonathan mentioned, we had to make sure our operation, because we're open, was sanitized and had the proper health standards to make our employees comfortable, and then any clients who would come into the office. We had to also change shifts. To make our employees comfortable, they worked at different shifts. And then, of course, from a social and moral standpoint, actually, we've been doing that for a long time, because many of our clients, part of their investment philosophy is not just rate of return only, economics, but it's also, they have a ideology or belief system. It could be a religious preference. So we have to go to portfolios that make them comfortable with what we're investing in. So, but we are finding out, though, that the younger generation is more like that. Actually, that's not the majority of our clients.
Sure.
Majority of our clients are over 50, actually. But for the younger generation that's coming in, we get referred to a lot of sons and daughters and children, and so they're very well aware of that. So what we have to do is look at investment options that will make them pleased. And I'm really amazed at how many of them would really prefer a social or moral agenda than they will an economic agenda,
that's great.
which is really a big shift.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
So those are some of the things that we're doing to make our clients more comfortable. Also, which was mentioned earlier, we're now virtual in many cases. I used to speak at about a dozen conferences a year. I'm speaking at 0 conferences this year.
Yeah.
And so what I did is I went to the virtual area, and it's actually been more efficient.
Yeah.
I'm finding that employees that are working out of their home or doing some virtual, there's less travel, which makes it more efficient for me. I don't particularly like traveling, and I'm a national firm, and I used to have to do a lot more traveling.
Yeah.
I'm finding that we're actually doing better now than we were prior to the COVID,
Yeah.
which is kind of interesting, So
That's great.
you got to look at a crisis. There's always opportunities. You just got to find those opportunities and react to them. That's part of what a leader does.
Amen. That's great. Yeah, I would say to all of our leaders that are watching now, pay attention to what's happening in culture. What is shifting? What are the new values? What's important to the generations that are coming up? And really think about what strategies do I need to support those shifts, because at the end of the day, each generation that comes up becomes the biggest generation over time, and that's where your customer is. And so you need to be thinking about how I can serve them, how I can connect with them in a unique way. All right, so let's hit this next question. Frank and Alexis, I want to talk to you. Let us into your mind for a moment, okay? In everything that's happening in this world, this complex world that we're living in now. What leadership idea, what principle, maybe it's a strategy, what are you thinking about right now that might be helpful to the leaders that you're watching? Maybe what you're really passionate about. Frank, why don't you get us started?
Yeah, it's interesting. So, this change event, and this is just a really material change event that we're in, really highlights the reality that a call to leadership is a call to prepare. You can be thrust into a leadership moment, but if you're not prepared, you're going to fail, right? And on-the-job training in the middle of COVID is a wrong time to develop leadership skills, because at that point, you're kind of behind the curve. So, as you and I were talking, getting ready for this, Dan, I told you the story of my old speech teacher. It's back in college, back in the day. And she had principles of public speaking, and one of them was that the effective speaker was a person whose character, knowledge, and judgment commands respect. If you take the word speaker out and plug in leader, it speaks to the really tenets required for leadership. The effective leader is a person whose character, that's your worldview. Who are you before the crisis? What are the positions you take? What is the muscle memory you have for business, for people? To your point earlier, in the middle of COVID, our immediate reaction at Adara was customer retention was the #1 goal. Because we're going to get through this thing, and what matters on the back end is our customer base. Otherwise, getting new customers is way more expensive than renewing customers. So, who are you? What's your worldview? Knowledge is the amount of material that we as leaders, take on. We should be subject matter experts in the fields that we purport to lead in. Right? So nobody wants you to get up there, Chuck, and say, hey, I'm running CBU, but I've never done this. Because then there's a tremendous amount of, wait, what? So really, knowledge is about amassing the information that's salient and relevant, for your business, understanding your competitors, the market, where it's headed, what's happening, the dynamics that are involved in your marketplace. And then judgment is the ability to take your character, the information you've amassed, and apply it to the right set of circumstances at the right time for the right reasons. Right? That's the judgment part of it. So in the judgment part as leaders, think of this, guys. I need to think about a leader about making sure I can scale my organization, right? What's my span of control in the middle of a crisis? I'm always tickled by people that say, I have 40 people reporting to me. How is that possible? Right? So what's your span of control? Making sure you put people in positions of problem solving that have the right skill set to solve them. Who handles communication? Who handles customers? Who handles your business continuity plan? Those kinds of things are important. Having principles as part of your worldview that you've adopted, treating customers well and fairly and equitably, or things like, I think leadership's interesting. So, the general principles as business people that I think we all live but maybe don't articulate. Here's one. The difference between risk and threat is proximity, and a good business person mitigates risk and eliminates threat. So as you start scanning the horizon, let's face it, guys, as leaders, we're paid to see around corners. That's our job, right? You start scanning the horizon, you go, uh-oh, that looks like a risk. I can either ignore it, in which case it becomes a threat. And eliminating threats can be very expensive. Mitigating risks ahead of time, can be very, very cheaper and much better. So my view of it is, as you think about leadership, be prepared to lead, right? Develop a worldview so that in the middle of the change event, you're not struggling and doing on-the-job training. Figure out, what knowledge do I need to amass as a professional so that I have the respect of people that are listening to me. And then equally importantly, develop that judgment and wisdom to say, when do I apply these things at the right time for the right reasons? That's kind of to me, the takeaway is the call to lead is a call to prepare.
That's great.
And for business people, I think it's something that you have to work on daily to get that done.
That's great. That's great.
Well said. Mic drop for you, Frank. I definitely, for us, one of the main things I keep meditating on, honestly, is this idea of servant leadership. And I know that me and you, Dan, have talked a lot about that. And it really is evaluating how I am as a leader and how I can effectively lead my team, and not only just my team, but how I'm interacting with my clients. And so one of the things that I really took a hold of during this whole experience was reaching out to current clients and also clients that I want to work with, and really asking, how can I serve you? How can I serve you? And I think so many times leaders can get blinded if it's pride, ego, and we think, we want people to serve us. But I think in this time, I was really evaluating, okay, how can I really be an asset to my clients, past, present, future? And so that looks like serving them in ways, if I do IG Live with them, if I'm speaking on panels with them, if I'm writing content for them, if I'm brainstorming virtual components for them. Because, in my industry, most events are virtual now. So I have to be thinking, how can we make the virtual experience better than in real life?
Yeah.
And that's the true challenge.
Yeah.
And then in that way, I'm serving my clients, I'm serving my team, and we can really experience some true growth, not only in our company, but within our character. And I think that's fundamental, is your character, how you lead your team. I'm very reminded that leaders lead not by command, but by example. And that's something that I've really been challenged on during this time. I'm definitely not perfect at all by any means, but I'm doing my best. And I think that when we put in that extra work, those clients, even those potential clients, we are going to be at the forefront of their mind when opportunities do come around. And so even if it's in real life or if it's virtual, we've already put in the effort in those working relationships so that we're not a stranger. We've already done the work. We've already gone above and beyond.
That's great.
So those are some areas for us and for our company.
Love it. I think two takeaways from what you both shared. One, from you, Alexis, for those leaders that are watching that have time on their hands, the reality is some, especially small business owners, who are struggling, they've been impacted severely based on the shifts that have happened because of COVID. They have time on their hands and they're not actually sure what to do with their time because their business has changed so much. One takeaway from you is call your customers and say, how can I serve you? Yeah. That is such a great idea. If you're a leader that's watching who's not really sure what to do. I had a couple of folks call me early on and say, I hate to say this, but I'm not sure what to do. Do you have some advice for me? And so I think that's a great bit of advice. And it could be your customers. If you're running a church, it could be your congregants. It could even be your employees. If you've got time, hey, how can I serve you in this difficult time? I think that's great. And then from you, Frank, the idea that leaders are paid to see around corners. There's some people who are watching who are probably going to drop out of the leadership game because they're like, hey, I don't know if I can see around corners, but I love that, and I agree. You're talking about anticipation, which I think is a key for the agile leader. So thanks so much for that, both of you. All right, our last question. The agile leader anticipates and adjusts, as I just shared. This is a question for everybody. So talk to the leaders, especially in your industry. What are you anticipating your business and your industry looking like post-COVID, and what adjustments are you making? So if you look to 2021 and beyond, what are you anticipating and what adjustments are you making? And I really want you guys to think about folks that are leading in sectors or industries similar to yourself. Would you get us started?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. Such an important question, and the word anticipation is something that I think a lot about for leaders in my industry. I talked about it earlier that the shift in the way in which content is shared with students, I think, will continue. I think for me, the exciting part is we're opening up a whole new market. And so what I mean by that is if we're teaching classes live and you can engage virtually, that means a student can be anywhere in the world. Now, that may not sound like a new thing because we've had online education for a long time, but the vast majority of online education is very passive. The course is sitting and waiting for you. It's excellent when it's done well, and there is a market for that. I'm talking about for us at CBU, there might be a student in Tennessee or North Carolina or Texas who thought about coming to CBU but said, I'm not sure I'm ready to move across the country. Well, now they can engage with us fully through the entire curriculum by participating in that course in a live manner. So that's why earlier I talked about the training. If we don't do this well, not only will we not get that market, we will lose the current market. And so for us, I think that the way in which we reshape and understand what is the fundamental purpose of education, what is it we're trying to accomplish, that then drives the way in which we deliver it. But I think that concept of how do we anticipate, how to change the way we deliver content, engage with the students is just such an important thing.
That's great. That's great. Alexis, for you, I'm thinking about, what an incredible challenge you have. You have a business that was largely based on bringing creativity and ideas to life at an event. COVID and the quarantine happens. There's basically no events happening. We're going to come out of this by the grace of God. There will be events in the future, but I'm sure things will look different. What adjustments are you thinking about in your industry and with your company in a post-COVID world?
Absolutely. I think that virtual events, they're not going anywhere. I think the virtual door is now the new front door of any business. That is what it is. If you're in the events industry, if you are not utilizing your digital and virtual elements, you're already behind. And so I think for us, we are really honing in on the virtual component. And it's something that he just referenced as far as CBU being online. I'm thinking automatically in my head, okay, well, how can we also create community now for those people who are viewing online, CBU, or for, in my case, conferences, right? Conferences, events. So it's not just information, but how can we actually elevate the virtual experience so that they're connecting with others online in the virtual realm? So something even with some churches that I've worked with in the past and in the present is, okay, so people are viewing online, but how are we building community? How are we helping them build community? How are we actually showing them that we care and that we can empathize with them versus them just viewing on a screen? So I think that's a big challenge for myself and also those in my industry. It goes beyond just the aesthetics. There's real people viewing on the other end of the screen. And so we need to connect with them emotionally, spiritually, and visually. We need to do that really well. And so I would say that that's definitely the area that we're going to be continuing to develop as 2021 comes around. And even when conferences, events, those things start opening up, you know, there's the virtual, it's not going to go anywhere because now people have really been able to see what works for them. So some conferences may stay virtual. They have less cost. They don't have to rent out a huge venue and cater to, you know, thousands of people if it works well within their business plan to just be virtual. So I think that those are definitely things that we need to think about. I think one other thing is looking at your business and your framework and not necessarily conceptualizing a new business plan, but revamping what you already have. So for us, that might look like marketing and advertising, you know, because just because we're creative on stages or a backdrop, that goes across the board into videos. Videos are a huge component. When you're scrolling through social media, videos do way better than any photo will ever get. And so how can you utilize all your giftings across many different platforms to reach a wider audience?
That's great. Yeah, I think for those that are watching in the church world, for so long, the church had really one channel to reach people, and it was at the church building. And then in the last, let's say 10, maybe 20 years, we added this online component. And now how we're thinking post-COVID in the church world is not just at the church and not just online, but also in people's homes, at their businesses, and then really a hybrid solution where people can engage both in person and digitally, depending on what's happening in their life. All of that is becoming more and more important with our strategy. So thank you. Frank, talk to us about shifts either with your company or just in Silicon Valley, and thinking about the tech companies, some of the biggest and best companies in the world. What shifts are you anticipating as we move into the future?
Yeah, it's an exciting time for digital identities. You know, we're a company that sells electrons for a living. We sell data. We sell them for money, which is great. So we sell data, and it's interesting. If you think about what this COVID event has caused, it's been a tsunami of new people coming online. In fact, it's interesting. If you look at online fraud attempts just from March through last week, they're up 75% over last year.
Wow.
And the reason is that people now have to shop online. They have no, you know, they've got to bank online, shop online, everything's online. And so it creates an interesting issue because in the internet world, in the digital realm, all that matters is, are you really you, and what do you want, right? That's the whole point, is I have to authenticate the individual, making sure the individual is real. So digital identities are the game. And it's an interesting dichotomy because in the real world, we have one identity. And that identity is supported by a hierarchy of identities. If you show up with your passport, you're Dan, because the U.S. government says so. And if you go to TSA with your passport, you can fly. If you show up at TSA with your library card, you probably can fly, but you're going to go through some friction, right? In the online world, we have multiple identities. Every one of us here has multiple digital personas. We have our work email, our school email, our home email, our spam email. And the challenge in identity is how do I harmonize those virtual personas into one identity so that I can validate and authenticate that person is who they say they are. And then secondly, so I can then turn around and say, what do they want? Be predictive about their behavior. Because I want to predict what you want before you ever tell me. That's the game online. So I see a dynamism in this market because there's now a myriad of digital identity providers. There's a whole supply chain of people that have created their own identity graphs and saying, here's Dan, here's Dan, here's Dan. And I think what's exciting about our business is there's coming together, I think, a consolidation. This will play to your world, Tony. I think there's going to be a lot of consolidation in this space because the big players can establish a bureau of identity, if you will. And Adara's mission, our mission today, is to inform identity across all of its permutations, to take disparate digital identities, harmonize them, and augment them with data so people make better customer decisions. So I think in the identity world, it'll get more and more exciting. It'll lead to something called sovereign identity eventually. Eventually people go, hey, wait a minute, that's my identity. I should have some say over how it's used and how it's informed. And so I think there's going to be consolidation in the space, a real dynamism to the space. And we're excited about where digital identity is going. And I think ultimately we would all agree that, you know, facilitating real commerce online, we all want to make sure that people recognize me when I get there. We don't want to jump through hoops, right? I don't want secondary challenges or know your customer tests. And I want people to tell me what I want, right? So I think that's going to be exciting for our space. I think for leaders in our space, there's a tremendous moment to grab customers. We have over 1 billion digital identities in our company, global identities. We think it's a good digital asset. I think growing that identity and making it predictive is exciting. So I see consolidation and some nice exits for the folks that are early. And that's where we're headed.
That's great. My takeaway is sovereign identity.
Yes.
Our theologians have a lot of thoughts on sovereign identity. That's a different session, I think.
There you go.
So thank you, Frank. Jonathan, I love how you guys are innovating and how you're thinking about alternative fuel. I love how you're thinking about, I see it as taking rideshare to the next level, where you can walk up to one of your cars with an app. Right, you can use the car for an hour or X amount of hours, return it. I love what you guys are doing. Talk to us about what you see is coming next in the industry that you're in.
Yeah, definitely. I think one of the major things is, you know, really contactless rentals, as you mentioned. And I think that's a huge benefit. And as now we're transitioning to this post-COVID world where maybe people want to reduce contact as much as possible, this kind of is the next key if people need transportation. Maybe they don't want to share a vehicle, share a bus with someone or get on a train. This is another alternative for that in kind of the multimodal world. And now we're also looking at different, you know, who's our customer base? I think this time, you know, we're able to see opportunities where maybe, you know, we can market towards essential workers that need vehicles, that need to transport. And this has allowed us to see a new market where we're now deploying vehicles at hotels and really ramping up our marketing at airports because we see that as kind of our next niche in this market. I think as bad as this pandemic has been, it's also kind of been a blessing because it allowed us to rethink and kind of see the future of our business model and really showed, how integral, transportation is and really push forward on this contactless transportation system.
Love it. That's great. Great stuff. All right, Tony, bring us home. How are you thinking about investing, protecting people's assets? New generations are coming up. What shifts are you thinking about in your industry in the future?
Yeah, asset protection is one of the primary things we do as a firm, and it's not just the stock market, it's from a lot of other areas, which we won't get into today, but I think it's critical that people are taking now, they're doing some soul searching. Questions like, now that I've had this event happen, what does my future look like? And the area of, for example, exit strategies on a business, which is an area we specialize in. Maybe they're concerned that this might be a time to maybe look at an exit strategy. So it put a lot of our business owners to the forefront where they're thinking about things like that. And people are also doing a lot more planning now because now they're saying, wow, I was healthy, today. I could be, I hate to say it, but I could be a COVID patient the next day or even die and have a mortality. So what I like, it's kind of an awakening for my clients and customers. They're a little bit more conscious now. They're a little bit more interested in getting their planning, their blueprinting, their design, their succession planning, their estate planning, their asset protection planning. They're getting more interested in it. As far as the investment area, to switch gears, I look at it as an opportunity. It was a tremendous opportunity at the end of first quarter. I mean, people were thinking, my goodness, the market's dropped this much. I'm looking at it as this is a tremendous opportunity to buy certain stocks that can benefit in a coronavirus. And you have to look outward and say, because there's going to be this cultural shift, for example, I don't need as much office space as I needed before. So what's going to happen to businesses are saying, logistically, I'm going to go ahead and reduce my cost and efficiency there. The other things, I'm doing more webinars and Zooms than I've ever done in my life. And I love it because I don't have to leave my computer. I'm sitting there doing it. I'm getting the same thing done. The next thing is many of my clients still like a face-to-face, even though I've worked nationally for years with people that have never seen me. It's hard to believe. You think somebody that would have their assets managed, they'd want to at least see the person. They've been trained to do conference calls. I'm finding the Zoom is wonderful where I can look right at them now on a screen. They're happier with that. So we're using it really to our advantage. So I think that the virtual area, webinars, all the things we're doing on social media, all the things we're doing in terms of transitioning, in terms of the cultural shift, we're going to take good advantage of it, and we're looking forward to it.
That's great. That's great. All right, I want to thank each one of you, our panelists, for being here and sharing your wisdom and your experience. You've all done an amazing job to lead your companies and organizations through this incredible crisis. And my hope for you that is watching, as a leader, that you're grabbing onto one thing, maybe one nugget that'll help you to lead your company, your church, your nonprofit through this season of change, and that you will really flourish on the other side of what's happening today. Hey, listen, if you want to connect with one of our panelists, just go to the conference website, find the panelist, click on their picture, their image, and you'll get their email address, and you can send them a note. I'm sure they would love to connect with you guys. I'm so glad that you joined us today with our panel, and I'm really excited to talk and see you guys soon.